Hello and welcome to another episode of the Revenue Revolution podcast brought to you by Joint Flows. Today we're joined by James Townsend, who is the co-founder and CEO at Mobilise. Welcome to the show, James. How are you?
Hi guys, yeah, I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me on.
No problems at all. Well, we always like to start off with a little bit of an introduction so our listeners know who James is, where you're from, how you've got to where you've got to today.
Sure thing. I'm actually originally a maths teacher, would you believe? That's how I started off. But moved into the startup world. My mum was diagnosed with MS when I was about six. Caring for a family member has always been a sort of a part of life, right? And I think that's something I share with many millions of people across the UK and many more around the world. But so often that experience can leave you feeling a little bit lost and not quite knowing what to do, whether or not you're doing it right, that kind of thing. So that put me on a mission to see where we can bring people together to share their experiences, learn from each other, and the goal is then to thrive in our caring roles. So that's where I started off with Mobilise. We've been doing that about 6 years now, grown the community to a really thriving couple of 100,000 people supporting each other. We laugh together, we cry together, we talk about bodily fluids together. It's all manner of human life is in there.
Awesome. That's funny you say that actually, because I have a similar story to yours. My mom was also diagnosed with M&S from when I was little as
Okay.
well. So I was as young as five. So similar story there. So I totally understand where you're coming from. Tell us a little bit about Mobilize. What is it you guys specifically do?
Well, so in terms of the business model, the local authorities in the UK have a statutory duty under the Care Act to make sure that unpaid carers are supported. That means with information, advice, and guidance, some of the emotional support, and also on occasion with sometimes payments, but also respite care as well. And actually, local authorities have found that really difficult to deliver, particularly because carers often don't know that they're in a caring role. Relationships with the local authority can be quite difficult. They're perceived as being an other organisation. Not I don't need to use a local authority because things aren't that bad. Lots of perception stuff in there. We're working with those local authorities, first of all, to go out and reach new groups of carers. About 80% of the carers on our platform have never previously accessed any support for their caring role. The second thing we do is provide that support, and a lot of that is through community. So it might be 2 o'clock in the morning, you're scrubbing poo out of the carpet for the third time this week. Gosh, you want to chat with other people who get that in that moment. So we can provide the platform for doing that. Then crucially, we can provide the data, the insights back to the local authority so they can better understand the needs of their carers and design services that matter. And that's been really important just in the last couple of years because the Care Quality Commission is now for the first time inspecting local authorities on that duty. So local authorities are really keen to find straightforward ways that they can implement that will make a difference for carers and be mindful of the really, really tight funding situation for local government at the moment.
Yeah. And so I guess a lot of what you do is build these relationships with the LA, with the local authorities. Talk a little bit about navigating that environment because I know that these local authorities can be somewhat of a difficult landscape to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is about relationships, right? And people buy from people, and we're all going on a journey. So, I mean, we've been at this for 6 years now, but we're just nibbling at the edges of what we could do in terms of disrupting and transforming the sector for supporting unpaid carers. So, while I want to hold their hand to go through the process and understand what this new technology could do for them, I also want to learn from them what are the big pain points? How do we design a roadmap in building our product that's going to meet their needs as we go along? So actually, I think relationships are so key because it's a partnership. And we bring some thinking on how technology can change things, but they have their experience as well. And far from just flogging a widget every now and again, trying to get into that position of being strategic thought partners together is really powerful.
James, well done, first of all. Like, it's obviously a mission-driven um, um, company that you're building, and we're all about missions here at John Inflow. So we're really happy to have you here and have you explain what you do. Would you be able to give a little bit more light on what your product does and where you're taking it so that the audience can understand and position
Sure.
it?
So the base level is a So the base level is a community platform where people can connect to each other, access resources and information. It's really, really key. The next step, which we're just launching in a couple of pilot areas at the moment, is the dynamic carers assessment. And that is where we're using, so local authorities have a statutory duty to understand a carer's need for support. You're getting into the details of the Care Act here. But that's a really difficult thing for them to do. We currently spend as a country about £60 million making that assessment. That's before any support happens. We spend £60 million just making a judgment on what support's needed. We think we can do that much more efficiently. So we've designed a dynamic carers assessment, which uses an AI interface, keeping in touch with the carer so they feel supported all the way through. And instead of being one snapshot a year with a human and a clipboard saying, right, come on, what's your name and
Mm.
date of birth? Instead, you can have an ongoing WhatsApp interchange, which meets the needs, meets the statutory duty for the local authority, but means that the carer gets a really responsive support plan. Because, I mean, Hitesh, you'll know probably better than me, caring situations change every week. So being able to be really responsive means that we can get that preventative support in early that makes a big difference.
Yeah, seems
And
like a no-brainer if you ask me. Sorry, go
James,
on, Mick.
I was going to ask because there's often it's a three. It sounds like there's a three parties relationship going on with kind of you in somewhere in the middle, James, where you're facilitating and providing a support system, and then you've got a government body, and then you've got an individual carer who's often in a difficult emotional state. I would imagine having to care for
Sure.
someone is not the easiest thing to do. How do you create alignment between these three parties? One being extremely administratively heavy, and the other one kind of trying to figure it out on the fly what's happening, and then dealing with the day-to-day evolution of the situation they're facing.
Hey, Mick, it's a great question, and my hairs are a little bit grayer than they were when I started this because that's a big challenge, right? And actually, it's more than just three different ways because you've got the carer, you've got the local authority, you've got us, but you've also got other providers in the sector. And we can't provide counselling, we can't provide grant funding, so we want to hand that over to the local carer service, or there may be other organisations as well that we want to link in with. So this is a really, I'm going to say messy, but I don't mean that in a pejorative way. It's kind of organic and complex. And the key thing there, I think, is that we want to get great outcomes for the carer. And if you get that right, everything else falls into place. So very often the first person we're speaking to at a local authority will be a carer's lead. Now, whatever the strategy of the organization, whatever the priority that quarter, a carer's lead, you don't become a carer's lead if you're not absolutely fizzing with passion about making a difference for carers. So,
Mm.
so our starting point is, look, there's some amazing opportunities to do amazing things for these amazing people. Do you want to come on that journey? And if we get that right, the carers that we're supporting absolutely love it, and they'll recommend to the local authority, please keep this. If we're making great outcomes for the carers, they want to keep it, then the local authority is saying, hey, this is great because our carers aren't burning out, so which is a very expensive thing to happen for the local authority. So happy, healthy carers means a more efficient system for us to run in social care. So suddenly the chief finance officer of the local authority, who is not going to be a cuddles and rainbows kind of person, is suddenly saying,
Mm.
"Oh, actually, this helps make my numbers work." Now, if you do it the other way and say, "Look, this is a great way to save money," and carers are all up in arms and not getting the support they need, you quickly get into disaster mode and everybody's fighting like ferrets in a sack. So actually having that really common vision of transformational, really impressive support for carers, everybody can swing into line with that.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned like the CFO and essentially what you've described there is what's important to the CFO is different to the carers, the first person you spoke to, apologies, I don't remember their role. Now, how is it? Because, more often than not, it's very difficult to be able to align different stakeholders through these different relationships that you're having to a common goal. And that's essentially what you're doing. And particularly with local authorities, there's so many stakeholders who can be involved at any one given time. How do you navigate that and keep people on the path of where you need to get them to for the greater good?
Well, Hitesh, for all, there's so many reasons why working to support the public sector can be a bit of a nightmare. But I love
Mm.
it because you know that we're all on the same side and we're all trying to get a great outcome in the long run. I also think there's something about this relationships, human to human, and keeping in touch, making sure that we're adding value wherever we can. And that may be a long time before we even start a sales cycle. Okay, so before we're talking about buying a product or delivering something, I want to be having conversations with all sorts of people at the council, really listening, really understanding what the pressure points are, how we can build this product in a way that's going to help them. And then it might be 2 or 3 years before they get to the end of a commissioning cycle and they're looking to shift things. I would hope that they're doing that then fully informed about the options that are available to them and that the future of carer support might look quite different to the way that it has previously. So I think that that slow burn, really high quality relationships with a number of people across the council is the best way to build really strong relationships.
And I guess
And oh, sorry.
so Rick, just one last follow up on that. I guess it's not just the case of getting them on board, but then maintaining that relationship as well on an ongoing basis, right? Because what you described earlier is how do we ensure our product continues to fulfill the needs of the carer, but then advances from technological viewpoint as well. So how do you maintain those relationships moving forward as well with such a diverse group of people?
Yeah, hey, it's a really interesting challenge. One of the things that we do quite a lot is a lot of research into the sector. What are the buying trends? What are the outcomes, the case studies that we can draw on? Local government has a real challenge around finding out what other people are doing, and there are some great organisations like the LGA or ADAS who are facilitating those conversations. So if we can share some information in, uh, help build that conversation about what's working well, where people are struggling, then we can keep the conversation going because we're adding value, and we can make sure that that carries on as a dialogue. So I think there's something about, I mean, crudely and in marketing terms, you'd call that a white paper, things like that. Um, but it's also keeping in touch. So if we know that somebody's piloted a piece of work and they're trying something new, I want to make sure I'm checking in 3, 6, 9 months to see how they're getting on and really see what we can learn from that. Not because I want to sell the solution, but because next week I'm talking to someone who might say they've got the same problem, and I want to connect them together so that they can learn from each other. I think the final thing that's really important to me, Hitesh, and it's so important for the public sector, is not to promise the earth and then to make sure that you deliver on what's agreed. The
Mm.
local authorities are completely allergic to stuff happening that's unexpected, either above or below. So it's really important to me that we have really clear agreement about what's being delivered, and then making sure we absolutely nail that through delivery of the product.
Okay, so we've been speaking a lot about relationships, especially with with the local authority and the council and how many people are involved. Talk to us a little bit about the starting point of that relationship and how long it typically takes to get to a point where they're partnering with you.
You know, it's really interesting that the starting point for us is almost always that the might be the carers lead or sometimes even the director of adult social care, who would be the most senior stakeholder in the council. But they almost always come to us as a carer, and they are interested in the kind of support that we can provide from their own experience. They then get to understand the methodology, the principles, the culture that we've created in the way that we provide that support. And they say, "Hey, I'd love to learn some more." Now that sometimes means so the fastest we've ever done it was in 3 days, which is a
Oh,
pretty
wow.
yeah, that was kind of crazy.
I didn't
But
know
it
local
can be.
authorities can move that fast.
Yeah. I do think that is exceptional. On the whole, we're looking at between 3 or 4 months, something like that, as a cycle to from first conversation to landing something, signing a contract. But sometimes that can be a year, sometimes two, frankly. So it's just
Mm.
about keeping those conversations going, making sure that we're providing whatever they need at that end to pursue the governance and so on.
Yeah, sure. And there's a lot of spinning plates, I imagine, as part of that process as well. Different people having to do different things at different times. It's in everyone's interest, obviously, to make sure that there's a good outcome. But also, equally, everybody gets really busy and different things come up and different priorities come up. So, how
Yeah.
do you ensure everyone's staying on track to deliver what they need to as part of that relationship to get to where you need to get to?
Well, look, I think there's a number of challenges, particularly for local government and particularly in adult social care. So one of the things that we see is we'll have got all the paperwork set up, and yeah, it just needs to go to it might be the department leadership team to give a sign off. The item might have 5 minutes in a monthly meeting, uh, but that's got a lot of stuff in that meeting to get through, and some of those things will be your residential care provider has just gone bust, and you've got 40 extremely vulnerable people who need somewhere who don't have anybody to look after them this evening. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Right? That is an immediate problem that people need to deal with. So I think we need to make sure that we're playing our part, that we're getting out the way when we need to, but when there's an opportunity for progress, we get that going along. So the key thing for us actually, in order to keep the process moving, is to make it as simple as possible for the people at the other end. One of the ways that we
Yeah.
do that is working through the G Cloud. That's a central government framework. It basically just puts all of the admin burden on us at the beginning, and the council can just drag and drop and buy the solution as quickly as they like. The other way of doing it is sharing documentation. So where
Mm.
one local authority has bought this already, they will have already done all of the background papers, the decision brief. If they can share that with somebody else, that's really effective. So trying to kind of manage that process and make sure that we're matching similar clients up to each other, that can be a really
Yeah.
effective way of moving people on.
So do you templatize then from one local authority to the other? Are you like, right, talk me through your process. How are you going to go through your due diligence phase to make sure we can get to this partnership and make it come to fruition? Or is it always a case of let me rediscover with each conversation, with each different entity, what they require?
I I think there's probably 5 or 6 different types of council that we're working with. And what seems to be really effective is to introduce people. So my job is much like, those 1950s telephone switchboard operators with the headset and just plugging people in.
Yeah.
That's a big part of my job, to connect people and say, okay, Andrea over here, she commissioned it this way. Let me put you in touch with her, and she can guide you through some of the paperwork that she's already got. That avoids templating, which might be quite sort of generic, but
Mm.
makes sure that people have got those examples they can use.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we appreciate this conversation around the relationships because it's such a minefield to navigate, especially with council and local authorities. But if we take a step back from that and think about your journey as a founder, which is always useful for our listeners to hear as well, you spoke a little bit about the origin of why you have an affinity to solve this particular challenge. But walk us through the kind of early days, and Mick has returned to the group. But walk us through those early days of, right, I had this idea, which is a noble cause that you're trying to address. But how do you then start to bring that into reality?
Yeah, sure. Um, Hitesh, I'm not sure this will be I'm not sure this will be helpful for your audience because um, we started off at the beginning of COVID. And
Okay.
so my co-founder, Suzanne, and when the country went into lockdown, we just kind of abandoned the idea of building a business out of this and instead just thought, right, how can we start supporting carers in a really meaningful way through this nightmare situation, which we assumed would last a couple of weeks and then all blow over, right? How naive we were. Um, so we actually stumbled across, in many ways, the perfect scenario for launching a startup. Um, every afternoon, we'd host a virtual cuppa on Zoom, like we're on now,
Nice.
and five or six, maybe it grew to 15, 20 people would come, and we would share. Right, what's the big challenge that we're working with today? Is it getting to the shops? Is it, you remember loo paper was a big challenge at the beginning? Imagine what that's like if you're
I
a
do
carer.
remember that. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so Suzanne would be chairing the conversation. I'd furiously be making notes. We didn't have those AI note takers back then.
Yeah.
Then after the half-hour conversation, we would generate a blog or a video or tips and tricks that we can share.
Mm.
The next morning, 5 a.m., I would get up and write an email to a mailing list, and that grew every day through COVID. So we were just doing that because it felt like the right thing to support carers with, and we had nothing else to do during lockdown. So as we did that, more and more councils stumbled across the mailing list and then came to us and said, "Hey,
Mm.
this is great." And we've got a real challenge because some of our existing services that were entirely in person, face to face, really struggling to provide any support at the moment. Could we pay you some money to do more of that for our residents? And we don't really know what that looks like, but can we go on that journey? And that's how we turned into a bit of a commercial model, identifying what it was they needed, how we could meet
Yeah.
that need, and off we went. So since then, it's grown. We're now in about 25% of English local authorities.
Wow, amazing. It's a great way to start a business because it's still starting at the point of value for the end
Yeah.
user, who in this instance is the carer. Mick, welcome back after your
Yeah,
internet
sorry about this.
difficulties.
Actually, this is a good segue, James, because so I've got AS and I'm eligible for care. So my partner's got a care taker, I don't know what it's called, a card that says that she is looking
Okay.
after. So I don't benefit from it because I feel fine. I'm completely mobile. Like I don't there's more people who need more care than I need. So I don't use it at all. But having gone through the process of getting diagnosed for AS, it was very, very clunky. And I would say like the from a technological point of view, like the system used were not good at all. Like you had to wait for specific time of the day to call the doctors. They needed to refer you. They couldn't refer you because they needed the specialist lens on it. But in order to access the specialist they needed to refer you. So then that in that vicious circle of who's doing the first move, then that gets escalated. Then you go into the hospital. Then the hospital system of records is not linked to the GP. So there's a
Yeah.
big gap there. And it took a year and a half to get a diagnosis. So my question for you would be like in the days of AI and all the buzzwords around it, how do you navigate inserting technology into your relationship building process when you kind of have a party who's a little bit behind in terms of systems and evolution?
Hey, that's a really strong question, Mick. Look, I think there's three things that we can do, which are really attractive to the user, and therefore to the buyer. In our case, the local authority. So, if I just look at our dynamic carers assessment, the first because this is a generative AI voice call initially.
Yeah.
We can offer the first question that we ask the carer is when would be convenient for you to have this conversation? None of this, you've got to make sure you're at home on Thursday at 10 or make sure you're available whenever. Um, if you want to do it at 2 o'clock on a Thursday morning, brilliant. Let's do that. Or you want to do it right now? Let's do it right now. Um, the second thing is that once we've had that initial baselining call, we can summarize what we've heard and what we think is your situation. In a traditional system, the social worker puts that into their notepad and takes it away, and you might hear back in 3 weeks' time about what was agreed. Well, for us, the first person to see that summary is the carer themselves. So they are in charge. They get to
Mm.
either approve it or improve it if they want to edit it. We've missed something out, whatever it might be. Then finally, one of the things I think is really important for us is that we're able to be just in your pocket. So at any time you can WhatsApp in and you can get that data through. I think the reason that I think that's really important is going back to your core question, like how do you get a public body to kind of move in that direction with you? And the trick is salami slicing. So, what is the fastest route to some benefit that we can achieve right now? So we actually we set things up to be using copy and paste integration, which sounds crazy, but for various reasons, colleagues in adult social care will know exactly what I'm talking about. You can't get an integration between two systems. But we can design our system to be really easily copied and pasted
Right.
across. And if you're
Mm.
saving 6 hours of a social worker's time, the extra 30 seconds to copy that across is let, let's let's not scrap the whole project because we can't fix that point yet. You talk to me in 6 months' time, we'll have solved that problem and we'll be on to the next one. So it's about tackling what is the immediate challenge in front of us, and then
Yeah.
moving forward. And hey, sometimes that progress is slow, but it doesn't mean that you can't take big steps forward.
Yeah, that's good. So who do you feel you perhaps have the most challenges keeping engaged and working towards joint timelines with? Because I'm guessing the carriers have got that need you're bringing a solution for, and then on the government side, the local authorities, there's perhaps a bigger process to go through. Uh, How do you
Sure.
manage the balance between, okay, well, this needs to happen on this side, or actually this needs to fit through to the other side, but there's a system limitation there that we need to tackle through clever workarounds. Now, how do you manage all of this?
Hey, it sounds like you've been in my position before, Mick. You know all of the challenges that we work with. I think the real challenge is when a local authority is mapping out its budget for the next year, really, really tight finances. You can say, look, this sounds like a great idea. It's definitely the kind of thing that we should be doing, but we can't afford it in this year. And we might be able to see that it would make the savings in 5 years' time, but that means an outlay of budget in this year. And I think the key thing there is for us to shift that conversation to make sure that we're in that long-term relationship. We can see the direction of travel, and that starts to unpick some of those initial conversations at the beginning of the process in that first year, where there might be an increase in expenditure or in order to realize really substantial gains in the future.
And the question I have also is because I mean, there's an additional layer of complexity for you where politics get involved, and every few years there's a new politic leader coming in, shifting, changing the games, putting more rules, taking budget away from something and um, putting it somewhere else. How do you manage that constant, macro change that you have very little control over? When you're building a product, I guess it's important to say, oh gosh, there's the next election cycle coming in next year. Like, what do we do product-wise? Because they might change the whole game next year with new rules or less rules or better or worse rules.
Sure. Well, look, I think there's two elements to this. One is at a local level. making sure that we're facilitating. Has my camera just stopped?
Yeah.
Can,
Yeah. Well, I just said before you hit. Okay.
James.
So, Mick, I think that's a really interesting question, and I think in terms of the politics of this, there's two levels. So, at local level, we want to do everything that we can to make sure that the elected cabinet member, the portfolio holder, and in the local council who has responsibility for adult social care, our platform is an opportunity for them to engage with their local residents about what they're doing, right? So we want to make sure that we're holding that relationship, we're facilitating carers reaching their counsellors and having a bit of a dialogue about what's going on. At a national level, yeah, you're absolutely right. A great example is we're developing this dynamic carers assessment. We're using AI in doing that. At some point, there will be some legislation about how you use AI in an ethical way. It's really important that we can be at the forefront of that debate, modeling really great practice so that officials at the Department of Health and Social Care can say, this is what we want it to look like, and then shape some of that regulation to ensure that carers get a great outcome and that we're using AI responsibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, James, look, we are just about almost out of time, but I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story and everything that you guys are working towards, which I'm a big fan of. Now I know about it as well. We do have a wrap-up question which I wanted to ask you as well, and I'd be interested in your answer just because of what you guys are trying to do. So, what is your favorite memory on this journey so far, and why?
um, I am incredibly fortunate that there are so many tech CEOs who are doing great work, churning out fantastic, I don't know, fintech software, whatever it is. I am so lucky to be able to have day to day a connection to our end users who have become friends and champions, and we're really close. And uh, I think there are a number of examples that really spike my memory, and you'll understand why I can't give too much detail away. But it's the
Yeah.
occasions when a carer will drop me a line, email or direct message on the app, um, to say thank you, and to give an example of their story where they wouldn't have been able to cope and to manage if it wasn't for the support that we were able to provide. And yeah, I think I'm a very lucky guy as a result of that.
Awesome.
Very good.
Well, look, James, thank you so much for joining the show. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in as well. Um, this has been the Revenue Revolution podcast. Until next time, bye for now.
Bye bye.